Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast, where we explore our shared love for watching and discussing movies, recorded in the late after-work hours, often in lieu of a good night's rest. I'm Emilio.
I'm Julian.
And I'm Madeline. The three of us are colleagues at a Midtown Manhattan music school. Yes, music is what brings us together, but movies are what keep us together talking at the end of the night. So we've created some order to this ongoing trend by recording these conversations, considering an overarching theme while we cycle through 5 unique guidelines for engagement.
You can email us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. Seriously, we would love to hear from you. You can also follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok for updates, highlights, clips, and other visual supplements to the audio we record at the handle Sleepless Cinematic Pod. And subscribe to our monthly newsletter at sleeplesscinematicpod.substack.com to get even more insights, recapped thoughts, and musings about our conversations and other related Sleepless Cinematic goings-on.
In addition to these main episodes, we record and release bonus one-off episodes as we see fit. And while we do this, you, the listener, can count on the three of us doing what we've grown to love, foregoing sleep for a discussion about movies every other week.
And this week, we continue our current cycle where we discuss Twins and Doppelgängers with a suggestion box episode. This is where one of us elects a film for the group to discuss. At least one of us will be seeing this movie for the very first time, and differing opinions may or may not be held among us.
And leading into the twins section of Twins and Doppelgängers, this week we are going to be discussing Dead Ringers, David Cronenberg's film from 1988, starring Jeremy Irons in 2 starring roles as both Beverly and Elliot Mantle, and then also Geneviève Bujold as Claire. And I'm super excited to talk about this film. This is written by David Cronenberg, but also co-written by Norman Snyder.
Yes, I'm very excited to talk about this film too. This, as was mentioned, as we built up to this in our prior episode, this is the first time we're talking about a David Cronenberg film in full on the podcast. And though I think we've made many passing references to him before, and I think for the most part, if not entirely, praising references to him, I'm really excited to actually get to discuss his material with the attention it deserves.
Absolutely. And I would say, when you hear the title of this movie we're going to talk about today, and you think about what Dead and Ringers might conjure up, we should say that this movie that we're talking about today is not to be confused with For Whom the Bell Tolls, which is Ernest Hemingway's novel from
Ringers
1940.
Tolls.
Exactly, yes.
I'm following.
There we go, yes.
That's an interesting one. I would not have thought of that.
Well, this is why we do this all together.
Yeah.
It was a book originally by Ernest Hemingway. It was also a film, a very well-regarded film from 1943, starring Tony Soprano's favorite, Gary Cooper, and Ingrid Bergman.
Now that's a man.
Yeah.
The strong, silent type.
Exactly, yes. Very different films, very different subject matter. Do not confuse For Whom the Bell Tolls with Dead Ringers.
Yes, and also with the Metallica song from 1984.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Ride the Lightning. Yes.
Which is pretty close in time to when the film we're going to discuss comes out.
True that.
Something else that's close in time to the release of the film Dead Ringers is actually another film from 1984 that, while it references something that would have been necessary in the making of the film Dead Ringers, it is not to be confused with Body Double.
Yeah, very nice.
True.
Yeah,
Brian De Palma's film from 1984, which I just recently saw for the first time. And it's very Hitchcockian, but updated for 1980s Los Angeles. Emilio, you brought it up when we discussed Blue Velvet last year as a comparison, and I absolutely see why.
Yeah, cool. I'm glad to hear that.
But yes, Body Double is not a double of Dead Ringers.
And we should also say that Dead Ringers is not to be confused with Dead Ringer, singular. A 1963 film starring Bette Davis and Bette Davis as a woman who kills her twin sister and begins impersonating her. And the tagline for this movie I found very funny because it's what Bette Davis does to Bette Davis and to Carl Malden and Peter Lawford in Dead Ringer is just what Baby Jane people will adore.
Right.
Which is a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. It's also so indicative of the style of promotion from those films.
Absolutely.
Really calling back the most recent successful film that they're starring in.
Yeah, that was back in the day when taglines could be mouthfuls.
Yeah.
That's true.
Recently, there was a restoration of A New Leaf that played at the IFC Center, and they had the poster on display. The tagline for that movie is gigantic in the best way.
It's very long. I think I saw it too.
Yes.
That's amazing.
And we can't forget the tagline for this movie that we're discussing, which is 2 bodies, 2 minds, 1 soul.
Yes.
It's an interesting read on this movie.
Yeah, because taglines, I mean, sometimes they seem to get the movie they're talking about. Other times it seems more like they were written for the advertising by someone who hasn't seen it yet.
Totally.
Like, a few years ago, this is like, I didn't mention this when we did our episode on Saltburn, but the tagline for that movie was, "We're all going to lose our minds." And I was like, that's not what that movie is about.
No.
Yeah.
Although, you know what? I remember seeing that one too, and I don't think it's necessarily inappropriate, but it's not the first thing I would think of.
Right.
No.
Yeah. It's like, that just makes it sound like more of a psychological thriller than an estate drama.
Right.
Yeah.
But
although the movie has, I think, some elements, I think, of a thriller.
Thriller, yes. Psychological,
up for debate.
Yeah.
Right.
But while we're still talking about things that aren't dead ringers, and this one comes into the picture for more than one reason, but despite being a film about twins, Dead Ringers is not to be confused with the film Twins.
Yeah. Same year.
Yeah. Same year. And originally the title of Dead Ringers, you could not come out with that title because the Arnold Schwarzenegger Danny DeVito movie that claimed the title went into production first and had more money behind it.
Yeah. I read somewhere that they actually kind of were like bought out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but I do think that Dead Ringers is a meaningful title for the film. I think it is the title it was meant to have. And sometimes
Twins is like a goofy title.
Yeah.
And that's appropriate for like a goofy movie, not to be confused with a Goofy movie, but a Goofy movie that is the movie Twins.
Right.
Whereas I think Dead Ringers fits the tone of this movie so much better.
I 100% agree. I would also say, if we're talking about movies that came out in close proximity to the one that we're talking about today, we should not confuse Dead Ringers with the film Dead Calm, which came out, I think, about 8 months later in 1989. This is notably Nicole Kidman's enormous break. This is the thriller. This is a thriller, by the way, that is set out on the water. It also stars Sam Neill and also probably Billy Zane's breakout role, kind of like a more stylized version of Polanski's Knife in the Water. Have you guys seen that movie?
I have not.
No, nor have I seen Knife in the Water.
Both films are good and in different ways, but Dead Calm, not Dead Ringers.
Definitely. But yeah, so, I mean, we've said the title Dead Ringers way more than the appropriate 2 times it would be to usher in this movie. But now we'll say a little bit about what this film, Dead Ringers, from 1988, not Twins, is actually about.
You don't want to recap Twins instead?
I'll be careful not to. So, Beverly and Elliot Mantle are identical twins who work together as gynecologists at a shared practice in Toronto. Lauded in their field, a rupture occurs in their equilibrium as brothers when a client named Claire Nouveau comes into the picture. Despite her desire to have children, Beverly diagnoses her with a trifurcated cervix, preventing her from doing so. Nonetheless, the sly and manipulative Elliot has engaged Nouveau in a sexual partnership, posing as the meeker and more sincere Beverly, who soon develops his own attachment emotionally to Claire Nouveau. As Beverly becomes more entwined with Claire to the point that he's also privy to her habit of taking prescription drugs, he begins an addiction spiral of his own, while Claire finds out from a friend that the doctors who she thought were one are indeed separate but identical twins. Claire confronts the two about the ruse she's been caught into while remaining sympathetic to Beverly, and when she leaves Toronto for work reasons, the gentler twins' spiral continues, resulting in abuse of prescription pills and hard drugs, to the point that despite Elliot's selfish motivations, even he cannot ignore the damage these events may do to him personally.
Right on. Yeah. It sounds like the movie that I'll get to this later, but that sounds like the movie that I worked really hard to get through.
I mean, you guys had both seen this before, right?
Yes.
With a caveat.
Okay, what's your caveat?
My caveat is that I think I saw the first half of this movie. I don't think I ever saw the end of it.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, I know I rented this movie as a teenager. I'm positive because I remember a lot about the first half of this, barely anything about the second half of this film.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I wonder if I finished it
Maybe
the first time. I don't know if I did.
You know who else had a hazy memory of the second half of this film? Jeremy Irons. He admitted so in, maybe not the whole second half, but the very ending. He admitted in the commentary that he recorded, I think, in 2003, that the final image of the film had escaped him.
As it approached, he was like, I don't actually remember how this movie ends, which I found very funny.
Yeah. And I'm the other one here who had seen it before, and it was in full. But despite having seen the film in full, which, by the way, was a year before we're recording this, just about, it was June 22nd, 2025 at Film at Lincoln Center. Interesting to note the series it was a part of, too, because I can't remember the header of the title, but it was a series that had the subtitle, A Cosmology of Jordan Peele's Us. So it was a lot of films that featured dual roles in some amount. And I think, in like bringing up Jordan Peele's Us alongside Dead Ringers, there was a visual comparison of the red outfits.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool.
We'll get to that.
Yes. Yeah. So there was a series going on at Lincoln Center at the time, and I saw Dead Ringers at the great Walter Reed Theater on 35 millimeter. But admittedly, in suggesting this movie for this cycle, there was an element of self-suggestion because, yes, I watched it all the way through, but it's the kind of movie that after the first viewing, I think is pretty difficult to process.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And so
yeah.
He's like, understatement. Actually.
Yeah.
Understatement.
And it's maybe not for the reasons that, you might find a David Lynch movie tricky to process after the first time, where it's surreal and you haven't quite understood maybe what the full metaphor is yet, or the narrative logic. Now, this is a pretty grounded story in terms of its logic, but it's just the pure confusion of seeing two Jeremy's Irons on screen. And I think that we'll get into it a little bit more, but in all of the different films with dual roles that we're discussing, there are varying degrees of contrast between the two characters played by any one actor. And I think that this is one of the films that up to a certain point has maybe the least palpable sense of contrast between those two characters. It's there, but you have to look for the details.
Yes, I agree.
So, Julian, when this entire cycle was kind of your brainchild, and this was a film that was, I think, included in that from the beginning. And I know it wasn't like the sole inspiration, but was this one of the inspirations for you as you were kind of thinking about this cycle?
It was kind of, and because I've noted that one of the inspirations was a movie we already have covered, Possession, because that was around the time I was starting to think about this, and that was also close to the release of Sinners, which features a dual role. And at the time, so here's what's accurate to say, that I was aware of Dead Ringers as an iconic film featuring a dual role. I had not yet seen it, but I was very curious to see it. And then eventually I did, about 2 months after I started thinking about the cycle. So it was, kind of a fundamental movie to it, but in all fairness, I hadn't seen it when I became intrigued.
Yeah. And I'm guessing you had not watched it again until preparing for this episode.
Correct.
Yeah. Because you were saying that, after the first watch, this can be a difficult movie to kind of process.
Yes. But there were a few images and plot points from it that left a very strong impression.
Emilio, you seem like you have implied that this movie was kind of difficult to get through. So I'm just curious about your kind of initial thought.
Yeah. Well, okay. This was an absolutely brutal rewatch or first watch or rewatch of the first half for me. And it is purely just about the circumstances. I was mostly on vacation for the last week.
Yeah.
And I was watching this movie at night by myself on a laptop with my son next to me.
David
asleep.
Cronenberg intended.
Exactly. And this movie was like the equivalent of that book that is sitting on your nightstand and you just can't get through the first 3 pages of it. You keep falling asleep. And then you keep going back because you're like, I realized I fell asleep halfway through the second page. And somehow I found myself at the 5th page. I kept doing it.
Yeah.
And I think I watched the first, 25 minutes of this movie or 30 minutes of this movie, I think 6 times in a row. It was actually really frustrating for me. But I did see this movie in its entirety once all the way through, eventually.
Yeah.
This movie does play a strong visual trick. And I think it is super intentional. I think it's very much built into how this movie moves, and obviously the story and the characterization of these two guys is like they start out being almost identical, and
because you're still learning as a viewer, you're learning the differences between them at the very beginning. Like I feel like once I got into the film, they feel a lot more distinct.
They also start making very distinct decisions in their own lives. So you start tracking them based on
where
that.
would they be character wise,
Right.
Who would be in this situation. But at the beginning it definitely takes a little bit to figure out like who you're seeing at any given point. It can be kind of disorienting.
Right.
Yes. But, well, maybe you've gotten into it a little bit by bringing up that, Madeline, but what you are, so you're the one here who is seeing this incontrovertibly for the first time.
Exactly. I had not seen any of this movie, and I had not seen the first half of this or any scene of this movie. So this is me coming to it for the first time. Cronenberg is a director I really like. He's a director I really respect, but he's also a director that I've not seen a huge chunk of his filmography. Mm-hmm. I've seen Videodrome and Crash, The Good Crash, and then like
Crash,
his most recent 2 films. And that might be it, actually.
Yeah.
And then now this. So this has been on my list for a while. Dougie loves Cronenberg. Dougie also thinks that David Cronenberg looks like my dad. And today's my dad's birthday.
So happy birthday, Richard.
Happy birthday, Dad. It is my dad's birthday today when we are recording this, and not today when this episode comes out and he will actually hear it.
A belated birthday. Happy birthday to you, Richard.
Yeah. Also around a year since we had him on to talk about Tom Waits.
Yeah. But I feel like I like this kind of full circle moment where Dougie always says that if my life was made into a movie, that David Cronenberg should play my dad. And then we were talking about a David Cronenberg movie on his birthday. That's fun.
That's great.
Wow, sweet. Well, did you like Dead Ringers?
Yeah, I enjoyed it, but I watched it all the way through once, and then I watched it with the Jeremy Irons commentary, and then part of the other commentary that's on the disc, which you have the box in front of you. I don't remember that guy's name.
William Beard, author of The Artist as Monster, The Cinema of David Cronenberg.
So I did not have a chance to rewatch it without a commentary. I really would like to, because I'm definitely still processing. But overall, I did enjoy this movie.
Yeah, I mean, the Jeremy Irons commentary is one of those. I mean, for me, like something that I give points to a commentary for is when the person recording it knows when to bow out for a moment, when an important line is coming up. And there are a few moments where Jeremy Irons does that, to his credit.
Totally. There are a lot of single person commentaries that I've listened to that are not good, that just feel like a person rambling and half the time don't even really feel like they're watching the movie. So I was a little nervous about this one, but no, I thought he was great. I thought it was really interesting. And I think that he's giving, obviously, an incredible performance in this movie. It's like kind of mind-blowing. I really, really feel for Beverly. Like I feel like there are times of this movie where I just have like a pit in my stomach in a way that I don't always have with Cronenberg, not because he's not a very effective director, but because that's not always the kind of direction that he goes.
Right.
So this movie I found very affecting.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. And I think that leaving that viewing at Lincoln Center last summer, like I knew I still had a lot to process about it, but I was certainly blown back by it. Like the emotional arc of it, combined with the very meticulous craft of the movie, I was very impressed by it. I've seen quite a bit of Cronenberg at this point. I consider myself a fan. I've even seen the man himself at the New York Film Festival premiere of The Shrouds back in 2024. I've seen in person what many people would probably suspect. He's a very pleasant presence.
Yeah. Does he look like Madeline's dad enough to play a movie of her life?
I think the enough to play the part qualifier. I think that's the essential detail there, because it's like, put the right, do his hair the right way. I don't know if there's any makeup involved.
My dad has very distinct facial hair, so Cronenberg's going to need to grow that out.
or use some convincing makeup. With the right adjustments, maybe.
Okay.
And also probably some vocal training, too.
The Canadian to Southern thing.
Yeah.
And like The Shrouds, I mean, that is a Cronenberg's most recent film as of this recording. But that, I mean, I didn't even think of this until I revisited, because of course I did, David Cronenberg's WTF for this episode, that The Shrouds also features one actor playing multiple roles. It's Diane Kruger in that movie. And it's like, to say that it's not a spoiler, it's a pretty elemental detail of the movie, but clearly, you know, applying some of the skills learned from making Dead Ringers even as recently as when that film was made. But so I think I've seen 9 Cronenberg films total. Dead Ringers was the 6th that I saw.
You saw Existence pretty recently, right?
I did,
Was that
yeah.
the first time
What'd you think of
seen
that
it?
movie?
It's a pretty cool one. I think it's aged weirdly well.
Weirdly well.
Yeah.
I agree. I haven't seen it in a long time, but I remember enough about it. I want to go back to that one.
Yeah. But that's also a good example of a kind of movie where it's Cronenberg through and through, but where he's not as concerned as maybe creating that emotional pit as much as, to put it appropriately, existential musings.
Right.
There's kind of a different goal with that movie. But yeah, Dead Ringers, I think that it is simultaneously like one of his most carefully made films and also one of his subtlest films. That there's a kind of bombast, especially we got to remember that this is the movie that follows The Fly, which is bombastic to say the least in terms of how the titular Fly is portrayed. But this is a more reserved movie in terms of special effects and those visual details that pop. But then, so we're talking about opinions here, and well, Emilio, we've heard about your experience, but not your opinion on the film just yet.
Totally. Okay, so I can really appreciate, as we've talked about, the technical craft that went into this movie because there's a lot of it. I agree with you, Madeline. This is a can't take your eyes off Jeremy Irons kind of performance.
Yeah. He's magnetic.
Very committed to the dual role nature of this. I think his acting is very subtle in really great ways. I can respect it also as an exploration of some themes that I think are pretty interesting. I might even appreciate it more the more we talk about it, but when the credits rolled on this one, I was pretty underwhelmed.
Ooh.
I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
I think this movie is a great start, contrary to my very difficult start-stop experience of first watching this, but akin to what you were bringing up, Julian, about the kind of emotional core of this film. This movie sets something up, I think, really interestingly, but then just has this really tough second act that I found very difficult to get through.
Interesting.
I think when this movie asks you to go get emotionally invested, I just could not get there with these characters.
Interesting.
Yeah, cool. It seems like that we, like Madeline and I, we both landed the other way on the emotional part.
I'd say I definitely feel emotionally invested in Beverly. I'm not gonna say I feel emotionally invested in Elliot.
Well, I do think is
that's
kind
intentional.
of consistent.
Yeah.
But I think the movie is asking you to get there with both of them.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah, and I think both of them kind of suck.
Oh, no, they both suck. That's something that I think is kind of interesting because there are individual moments, like I said, where like I really was feeling for Beverly, but there also are several scenes in this film where he's just a complete asshole and like a misogynist. And I have notes on some of this that I think we're going to get to soon.
There are a lot of them there. Yeah.
But like he makes some really terrible decisions. But before he and Claire start taking drugs together, in the scene where she is confronting them because she has figured out that they are playing her and she is seeing both of them, when she splashes the drink in Beverly's face, there's something about Jeremy Irons' just complete heartbroken, like sunken face in reaction to that just like made me want to cry. Like I think it's so affecting. There's like something in Beverly that feels like someone who has a softness that's like been taken advantage of. And because of that, I think has also hardened himself. So meaning that I think that there is a potential different life for Beverly should he not have the I'd say, negative influence of Elliot, where he maybe could be a better person. But I think he's like kind of a doormat, and that ultimately leads him to be manipulated and then evolve into that same type of person who's capable of that manipulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see all that.
Totally.
I would also say that what I don't buy about this movie is that they've been doing this for as long as they have.
And no one's
just
figured it
now, and that just now he's catching feelings for somebody. Because if he actually is that sensitive, the moment they actually do something like this the first time, there is going to be some pushback. There's going to be something. I love that scene. I think it's very effective. Like when you watch it, I agree with you. He goes right there and he starts like crying, and it's that wonderful thing of he's been splashed in the face, and so it's like, what's tears, what's water?
Yeah.
And then Elliot comes back and he's like, oh, glad we got that one off of us. You know, he's looking back.
Yeah.
It's all done very well. Technically, it's really good. I just don't buy that these
I don't
people,
buy it because they've been doing this.
They've been doing this for a while.
They've played so many women in this way.
And to me, my read on it is he's not as sweet as he really is. He does have a sensitivity. I agree that Elliot doesn't have.
He had like the germ of sweetness maybe years ago, but now he's been in this, you know, charade with his brother for so long that he's like lost that part of himself, and he's kind of become just as bad as Elliot, and they're manipulating women together and doing terrible things. But then Claire kind of starts to bring this original softness like back out of him.
Yeah.
In a way that I find pretty compelling.
Me too. And it's also worth noting that this is you get those two prologue scenes of them before the main plot of the movie when they're kids, and then when they're at, I assume it's Harvard, as it says Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Yeah, exactly. I assume MIT does not have medical school, I don't think. So my guess would be Harvard.
But so the present day story starts with Claire as their patient. So we don't really get a look at their lives beforehand. We also don't know that there would have been even the potential for this emotional investment with anyone before Claire.
But I see absolutely what you mean, Emilio, where you're like, hey, this is not new.
They make reference to it over and over again.
Yeah.
That this is
a
little
known
game
for this.
that they've played.
They're known for this game.
Yeah. In fact, there's that friend of Claire's eventually that is like, hey, okay, what are you getting? One of the things that I did find really interesting about this movie, I mean, there are a lot of interesting things. I feel like this is a great movie to get into, but I thought it was really interesting that the creatives behind this movie wanted to center gynecology so prominently. From everything that I read, this was a real sticking point for Cronenberg and everybody behind this movie, but it was also a source of tension for the money people. Cronenberg said he's like, you know, producers were telling him, well, like, can't they just be lawyers? And he's like, no, it's a very important aspect of this movie that they are gynecologists. So I was interested in asking you all what we thought this shared profession that Elliot and Beverly have, what we think the filmmakers hoped we would understand about them because of it. And if there's maybe any other kind of reading that we had that maybe feels distinct from any of that.
Quickly, on the commentary, I don't know that he's necessarily accurate about this, but on the commentary, Jeremy Irons says that it was Robert De Niro who asked if the twins could be lawyers.
Yeah.
Because he was being considered for these roles, but was uncomfortable. I'm sure that this came from multiple people.
Sure. I would call Robert De Niro a money person by that point.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to wonder who those other people could have been. But to answer your question, well, before we get to any interpretation of that, there is an element of this that is simple fact, and we haven't acknowledged yet that Dead Ringers is loosely based on a true story. I'll elaborate on loosely in a moment, but there was a true story of twin gynecologists named Stewart and Cyril Marcus, who both practiced together in New York City, and they were about 45 years old when they died in 1975. And, David Cronenberg clarifies in his WTF interview that though the film Dead Ringers is widely considered to be based on the book Twins, which is about the shared lives of Stewart and Cyril Marcus, that he said it's actually, it's not really drawn from the book as much as there was an article. He didn't really specify when and where, but there was an article he read about the two of them.
Twins is also like a highly fictionalized version of the Marcus twins' life.
Yeah, but the real people who this film is loosely based on were gynecologists. So there is a simple element. I mean, accuracy doesn't feel like the right word because it's not aiming to tell their life story, but of deference to source material in that way. But then when it comes to, all of these struggles in production to actually get the film made because of the fact that they are gynecologists, well, David Cronenberg said something. They're on the Shout Factory Blu-ray. There are some vintage interviews shown there too, where in one of them, David Cronenberg says that, because there is an important element of sexuality in the story and in what happens with these characters, that keeping them as gynecologists, he thought, added some weight to what happens to them from then on, which I totally agree with. And I think that, even from the first viewing, I never exactly questioned the fact of these two twins being gynecologists. I sort of just, I rolled with it, and, understanding too that, that this was the sixth Cronenberg film that I saw. I had become well aware by that point that David Cronenberg is very interested in what goes on with the human body. I didn't presuppose any idea of how he was going to interpret gynecology from that. But, to quote another thing that he brings up in the WTF interview, that he says filmmakers spend more time depicting the body than anything else, and that the body is kind of the filmmaker's canvas, to sort of explain his mentality about what people call, but he doesn't really like the term, body horror.
Yeah.
It was not surprising to me that Cronenberg would be interested in a profession that, would bring someone's curiosity to the places that his mind often seems to go.
You could argue that there are many types of doctors that they could be that would fit this, but I do think that these characters have to be gynecologists. I think the sexuality aspect is the main one for me. During Claire's initial exam, Beverly, I think it's Beverly, says says to her that he always thought there should be beauty pageants for the inside of bodies.
Are we sure I think that's Elliot.
Maybe.
I think that's when they switch, don't they?
I can't remember which side of it. You're right. They both are in that initial exam. And I'm not sure at what point this conversation happened.
But I think your point's a good one. Sorry,
one of them say this. And so both of them have this admiration for women's bodies in their work and in their personal lives. But there also are these like darker implications that come from the fact that they're taking advantage of women who trust them and are in a very vulnerable state. And something that I kind of alluded to earlier is that the two of them have a lot of like deeply ingrained misogyny.
Yeah.
And this comes out in Beverly, like as he's kind of descending into addiction. He then has a few kind of mask off moments where he just like says the quiet part out loud. One of these is when Elliot is accepting the award for something. And Beverly comes, I guess he seems more drunk than stoned, but he is not sober. And he runs up onto stage and he says, "I do everything for those bimbos besides taking them home and sticking it in them."
Right.
And everyone's kind of like, oh, I can't believe he said that. But it's like, yes, of course, he's drunk. But you don't say these kinds of things when you're drunk if you don't kind of believe them when you're sober.
Totally. Yeah.
There's also the scene where it's in the second half of the film where he is using their gold-plated thingamajig as a speculum.
Yeah.
Which it's not super fun to watch that scene.
No, I think it's awful.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say it's super not fun to watch it if you've had a pap smear.
Right.
There's like a very particular kind of visceral feeling that is not fun for me when I watch that scene.
I can imagine. Yeah.
But the way he scoffs at his patient when she's like, "That hurts," and he's like, that hurts.
Yeah,
and
brutal.
Again, I understand that he's like in the throes of addiction at this point. I understand that. But the fact that he at this point has so little empathy
and regard,
and is also like, this is malpractice also.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Like,
it's not up for debate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're just, I do think that all of these things fit together in a really interesting way, because I think Cronenberg, and I guess by extension the co-screenwriter, are able to kind of look at like, here are these men who are in this position of power over women and are abusing that. And like, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? What does that say about these characters? I think it's trying to kind of reckon with these men who are in a position where they're going to take advantage of vulnerable people, and because of their profession, vulnerable women specifically.
Right. Yeah. I also think it's a really neat way to telegraph how self-absorbed the two of them are, because the female body is so tied to their origins and the examination of these organs that created this situation that they're living with is another angle on this, that they have chosen to dedicate their lives to the study of the thing that created this unusual situation that they feel like they are at times benefiting from, and then maybe also trapped by.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking back now to the very first scene of the movie, beyond the opening credits, which, by the way, I love those opening credits.
Oh, yeah.
They're really cool. I agree.
Yeah, the artwork there combined with
the
Howard Shore's score.
Absolutely.
It's like that score is such a great example of less is more. Da, 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 da.
Totally. I just wanted to say that on the William Beard commentary, he mentions that in these opening credits, some of these instruments you see are these kind of like fictionalized gynecological instruments, but some are medieval torture devices.
Yep.
And I just think that's very cool, because it all blends so seamlessly together. You really don't know which is which. Think about that.
Exactly.
I feel like it also washes over you in a way that I think, Julian, I agree with. It really just set you in this world where you're like, what is appropriate, what is not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised to hear that some of those are medieval torture devices. And also that I love it when you can identify a director by how they do opening credits.
Yeah.
Because there's just a tone that Cronenberg creates in the opening credits, even as recently as something like Crimes of the Future or The Shrouds. Like, you always know when it's one of his movies. Existenz does this too.
The Fly, I think, too.
Yeah.
Howard Shore again.
It's been a little while since I saw The Fly, but then...
It's a little more direct, but it's with that Howard Shore score. It's so good.
Yeah, Eastern Promises. I think that one's a little more straight to the point, but then like Maps to the Stars kind of has it too.
Oh, I would say History of Violence is one of the coolest opening scenes.
Still need to get to it.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's on HBO Max right now. I will do it soon. But yeah, so after those happen, that first scene where you have like two actual twins in the movie playing the younger versions of Beverly and Elliot, that it's also, I think the very first line of the movie is one of them saying, "Have you ever heard about sex?" And it's, and then, they try to make a pass at this young girl who's their age at the time, and she rejects them.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's hilarious, but it's very foretelling too. And it speaks to your point, Madeline, about like the misogyny is deeply ingrained in them.
Yeah.
And then, it's like the other prologue scene is them, seemingly having, it's not like they get a patent for this instrument, but they've designed and been awarded for this gynecological instrument that they have invented.
The mantle retractor.
The mantle retractor.
Yeah, it's like a surgical instrument, I think, for specifically gynecological surgery.
Yes, while at Harvard. But then, like, and in thinking about, like, the status of their jobs, too, I mean, I don't totally know what I'm going to say about this yet, but I have to bring up this scene that comes up pretty early in the movie where there's no, like, active medical malpractice going on, but I believe it's Beverly sitting behind a desk speaking with a potential patient who's looking for a procedure that they can't really offer. And it made me think a lot of the True Coat scene in Fargo, where there's a conflict between the customer and the provider. I'm not even going to say salesman, because that's not exactly what a doctor is, but Because like
they're selling something.
I was going to say it's
selling
maybe not too far off.
Yeah, but it's
he even admits to in that scene.
Yeah,
he's like, "This is the service I provide.
Yeah,
not the thing that you are asking.
We don't do husbands.
Yes.
Yeah. On the one hand, like the customer isn't always right, but on the other, there is like he is forced to respond with the coldness that maybe it doesn't go with the profession, but he chooses to go cold there.
I really love that scene though,
Yeah.
because I think it does set up that this is another Claire Nouveau. Like, because you see the way she's rubbing his hands in a very familiar way.
And I love the way that's shot when they're holding hands, because you see her and you see both pairs of hands right in front of the camera, but you don't see him. I just think it's really well shot. It's very interesting.
Absolutely. And then there's a point too, like thinking about the like this is jumping ahead closer to the end of the movie. It's not exactly like a moment you'd call a spoiler, but there's a point where Beverly's descent seems to be at its worst, and then Elliot is admitting to his lover at the time, who's seems to be a more consistent presence in his life, Carrie, played by Heidi von Paliska, that he has this hubris about him seemingly the whole movie, but where that starts to crack is when he admits that all of his work is dependent on Beverly's research.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then like the professionalism, it is both their strength and, a way that they're able to manipulate their professionalism is their weakness.
Yeah.
I know that all three of us agree that their profession is a strong suit in the film, but I wanted to ask you all if we felt like there was a different profession that the Mantle twins might have that could have created a compelling backdrop for this film.
My first thought, if there were to be something else, is maybe like professors.
That's one I have too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a little bit of that.
In a way, I mean, Elliot kind of is. I mean, he does these lectures, and he says something about teaching too. So but maybe professors less specifically connected to being doctors, and just professors of some kind. Maybe people who engage in psychology, or sexuality on a professorial level.
Yeah, I wrote just for myself, I felt like they could be professors at a college. One of them is a psychologist, and the other one is like maybe more in the arts or theater. And that's where the two of them feel like they need each other. Because there's like a sensitivity to one and then there's sort of more of a clinical understanding of people that they feel like they can kind of trade off on.
I think it's interesting that you chose to kind of to separate them slightly, more so than they are in this film.
Right.
Where they're so intrinsically linked. I was having trouble because, as Julian, you were just talking about the Cronenberg of it all, like the fact that they're in this profession that deals with the body so specifically, I think works so well in a Cronenberg film that I'm like, I don't know, like,
don't touch it. It's cool.
Well, I'm kind of like, don't touch it. And then I'm kind of like, morticians or like forensic anthropologists. Like still, I just want them to be dealing with bodies, but I'm like, maybe they should be dealing with dead bodies.
Maybe so.
Maybe they can't be trusted with live bodies. We briefly see them with cadavers, and it does seem like maybe, the cadaver does not need to consent.
Yeah. The medieval torture devices maybe could be implemented there in some way. One other thing, and maybe this is a way we can make our way into comparison corner. I also thought about a hairdresser. I thought this movie has an odd...
Very shampoo of
Exactly. I feel like this movie honestly made me think of shampoo for a little bit.
Yeah,
there's
totally. You know, a guy that is, well, in this case, it's two guys, but a guy that is in this profession where he is dealing specifically with women.
Exactly. Gains their trust.
And gains their trust. They're in kind of a vulnerable position.
Exactly.
And, uses...
Bodies, maybe?
Having to do with their physicality in some way.
Yeah, and it's not permissible by the nature of the profession, but it is, it is something that can be explained in relation to that.
Good one. Just having some fun with that.
No, I like that.
Yeah.
So we have stepped into the comparison corner.
Here we are. Does anybody want to get started?
Well, I'm going to do something that, maybe the things that you both say will reverse this, but I'm going to, in a first for comparison corners, I'm going to pass.
Wow.
Yeah.
We started Comparison Corner mostly because you bring up so many comparisons.
It's true, but I like, it's just to give you a little window into my mind when I watch movies. I mean, yes, that's depending on what I watch. If there's a movie with a lot of comparisons, they're coming up left and right. But, for this one, it's, I was very invested in the narrative and what plays out. But this, the comparison juices, they were not flowing. I think this is, despite being about duality, a very singular movie.
Fair enough.
I will say, as we've gone through this cycle, this is an interesting one for comparison because so much of what the subject matter is in these films is it tied to something really unique and specific. And so, I see and accept your position.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe you two will bring things up that bring things to mind. We'll see.
I wonder if mine will, based on past conversations. But Madeline, if you have something, you can go for it.
Yeah, I do. I mean, because Cronenberg does have such a unique style that carries over to his entire filmography, I couldn't help but think of another Cronenberg movie, which is Crimes of the Future, because it's specifically like one part of Dead Ringers is the fact that Claire has this like mutation that does not exist. This is not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can have a double cervix, but there has not been anyone in existence in that we know of recorded history that has had this like triple trifurcated cervix. This is not a thing.
Yeah.
And normally even having a double cervix would come with a double uterus, which is in itself extremely rare. So they're making shit up and that's fine. I just wanted to point that out. But there are these like mutations. It's funny because as the film goes on, Beverly tries to tell Elliot like all these women, they're coming in with their mutations. I don't know what's going on out there. This man is high out of his mind.
Yes.
So it's like, I actually don't think he has encountered any women with quote unquote mutations other than Claire. And I think he's just like hallucinating, most likely.
I think you are correct.
But he makes reference to these mutations, and that's so much of what Crimes of the Future is about. And Crimes of the Future is more specifically like, it's such an environmentalist film, and it's more about like how plastic is doing this to humanity and to our bodies, and it's, permanently changing us and speeding up our evolution, et cetera, et cetera. But because of the kind of mutation aspect of Crimes of the Future versus the mutation aspect of this, I was thinking about the two, and surgery plays a big part in each of those films. Like in this movie, in Dead Ringers, it's more accurate to reality in that I don't know exactly what this is called, like when people observe surgery. There's like a term for that.
Yeah, I don't know it.
I wish I could tell you, but I don't.
Anyway, it's like on display for like a class or something.
Yeah, medical students or
exactly.
something, or new residents or something.
So there is a certain amount of performance to the surgery in Dead Ringers.
Oh yeah, and with Elliot, I feel like he's
there narrating,
trying to hold court and
exactly
be slick and everything. Yeah,
exactly, kind of like an MC.
Yeah.
And then again, in Crimes of the Future, the surgery as performance art is also like a huge aspect of that film.
Yeah, maybe an even greater aspect of that film.
Exactly. It's a much more central aspect of that film.
Yeah, I got to come back to that one. I saw it when it came out.
Same.
Yep, I definitely agree with that. And also that David Cronenberg himself doesn't prefer that the term body horror be used to describe his films, but there are a few of them that are unambiguously horror in their tone and their arcs, like The Brood or Videodrome or The Fly. And Dead Ringers, it comes at an interesting place in this streak of, mostly horror films, because then this is where it gets like, still aesthetically, it's very much in the Cronenberg world, but what it aims to do is very different. It's more of a drama. Then Crimes of the Future is another one where it's like, the Cronenbergian vision of the human body is very present, but horror, not exactly what that is.
Yeah, totally.
And that's a broader thing with a lot of filmmakers who are labeled as body horror, where I feel like it's more just kind of like dramas with bodily distortion, like someone who's considered one of the contemporary heirs to the Cronenberg legacy, Julia Ducournau, who made the Palme d'Or winning film Titan, as well as a more recent film called Alpha, which people didn't really go to see, but I thought was really excellent. And she, like in her own words, she calls it's the uncanny that she's drawn to. It's not horror exactly. It's the uncanny. But yeah, all to justify this comparison you made.
Excellent. Yeah, that's mine. I also just wanted to use this opportunity, and we can either leave it here or someone can edit it into the beginning. I wanted to correct myself and say I've actually seen more Cronenberg than I thought, because I forgot about Cosmopolis and Map to the Stars. So I've seen his most recent 4 in addition to the others that I have seen.
Yeah. But those like Cosmopolis and Maps to the Stars, they're definitely like concerned with different things than many of his other films.
Sometimes I forget that they're Cronenberg. I'm sure if I rewatch them, then they would feel more distinctly him, but they're not the first things that come to mind when you think of his normal style. So.
Yeah,
definitely.
And I feel that way about History of Violence and Eastern Promises, which are 2 of his films that I have seen. I have not yet seen Crimes of the Future, so you have intrigued me.
And there are 2 Crimes of the Futures.
Yeah, there's the...
not to be confused.
Not to be confused with both of which he directs both of them on like either side of his filmography. So he has one in 1970, and then he has one in 2022, which is the one we're talking about.
Okay, good to know.
I've not seen the original, and they're also, it's not a remake. Apparently, they're different stories. I don't actually know why he chose the same title for both of these movies. I'm sure you can Google it, but I do not know offhand.
Interesting. All right. I will say, watching this movie for this talk, I was getting a deja vu feeling that I had previously spent time in the world or in the settings of this film before, and since having seen the first half of it. And then when the twin escorts arrived, that's when it hit me. I was like, oh, this movie is really hitting me like American Psycho. Mary Herron's adaptation of Bret Easton Ellis's novel. Both of these movies have a lot of these minimalist but really spacious modern interiors that seem to dwarf the characters that are in them. I do think that Patrick Bateman and the Mantle twins would approve of each other's tastes. Maybe Bateman a little more begrudgingly or like jealous of their taste. I think
like a game recognized game kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, both of these films they're more or less set at the same exact time period, which is the late 80s. And I think there is some commentary in Dead Ringers that is very similar to that of American Psycho, which is we got these wealthy men ostensibly in high positions of power that are losing a grasp on reality. And there is this descent into madness. And in American Psycho, I feel like it's a lot more tied to like wealth and materialism. That's producing this sense of entitlement and a disconnect to the world around the main character. And in Dead Ringers, there's a lot of disconnect and entitlement, but it comes more from like society praising genius, how that allows you to get away with things. And then there's all these added layers of codependency and identity. And, they also both deal with characters impersonating someone else in order to get things that they want. I think both movies also have really compelling lead performances by acclaimed actors of their generation. And I'm going to say this too, that this connection does make me curious to know more about what the Mantle twins thought of the pop culture of that time.
Interesting.
We do get one glimpse into this, which is Elliot watching
his favorite program,
which is Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous with Robin Leach.
Well, he does love glamour.
He does. And he is watching it at the beginning as well as the end, when he does have that incredible line. It's maybe the hardest I laughed, which is he tells his girlfriend who turns up, he's like, what did you do that for? It's my favorite fucking program. So I'm just wondering if Patrick Bateman would enjoy reading the National Enquirer, or what Beverly and Elliot think of Huey Lewis and the News and solo career of Phil Collins. Anyway, that's my pick.
Well, I think that Beverly and Elliot Mantle would agree, given the nature of their profession, that it is hip to be square.
Yeah, that too. I think, yeah.
But we must acknowledge, since you mentioned American Psycho, that Dead Ringers is a Canadian film.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is true. So
they
maybe Canadian
Psychos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I thought of, just because of, how we're talking about Cronenberg, I thought of a speculative comparison. Speculative in the sense that this is to a movie of his that I have not yet seen, but which seems on the surface to have some commonalities with Dead Ringers, which is A Dangerous Method.
Oh, yeah. The one about Freud?
Yeah. It's, it's adapted from a nonfiction book called A Most Dangerous Method, the story of Jung, as in Carl Jung, Freud, and Sabina Spielrein. And, well, it's, when you've got two doctors, and I don't know exactly what Sabina Spielrein's relationship to them is, but two male doctors and one female counterpart. Mm-hmm. And, the profession of medicine is coming into it. It seems like there must be, I don't know that there's a romantic element, but, this kind of ensemble of characters in a Cronenberg movie, also based on a true story. I mean, seems like there will be grounds for a comparison.
Part 2, baby. Let's go.
Totally.
Yeah.
And before we step out of the comparison corner, we probably should have said this for not to be confused with, but Dead Ringers, there's also a mini-series.
Oh,
this
yeah.
is true.
With Rachel Weisz.
Exactly.
Yeah, which I haven't seen yet. I want to watch it after seeing this movie. I just didn't have time to.
I do too.
To fit it before the recording. But yeah, that's that I heard was well reviewed.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? As we were talking, I did think of a comparison.
Of course.
It's very brief, but just talking about the medical profession, I thought of The Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Colin Farrell plays a doctor in that, and also the involvement with someone who I think is initially a patient, but becoming more personally involved with Barry Keoghan's character. Mm-hmm. And
the ethics of malpractice.
And eventually, the character just descends fully into an emotional territory, and it's not about the ethics of his job anymore. And, for those who haven't seen it, I won't say anything more, but tangential comparisons.
100%.
I'm there with that one for sure.
Yeah. And this has been Comparison Corner.
Beautiful.
So of all the films in this cycle, I think that this is the one where our lead actor probably has the most screen time, at least so far. Because with adaptation, and with Cloud Atlas both, it's different stories. You're not only focusing on the characters portrayed by the lead actor. There's different stories that are happening throughout the films. And I think it's going to be true with the rest of the films in the cycle.
I think you're right. I feel like this movie, it might hold the record for this type of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's in almost every single scene. I think the only scenes that neither of them are in are the scenes where Claire is separate from them. Like when Claire is having lunch with her friend who asks her about her dating the Mantle twins. And then even the scene when she's talking to her costumer is then immediately interrupted by the phone call. So he's even in that scene. You just very briefly get her talking to a different person. Anyway, Jeremy Irons has a particularly difficult task in Dead Ringers because Beverly and Elliot are meant to be completely identical in appearance. And so the audience has to rely almost entirely on his performance to distinguish between the two rather than costuming and makeup. There are some costuming and hairstyling choices that do make them a little bit distinct, but largely they're meant to look exactly the same. So it's how he portrays these two characters has to kind of lead you through. So what distinctions were you guys able to latch onto in his characterization of each twin that helped you to tell the difference between them? Or was that difficult for you? Were there points where you could not tell the difference between them?
It was difficult, but there's one thing that jumped out, and it was something that I did hear Jeremy Irons talk about retroactively after I saw the movie and was like, oh yeah, I think I caught this, is the way that Beverly holds his jaw. He really clenches his jaw a lot.
Yeah.
And you see it early on in the film as if he feels like he's muzzled in a lot of ways. Yeah. I think it's a great way to visually contrast how Elliot has that sort of charm and that gift of gab, and he's able to really bring people in. Yeah. And Elliot, on the other hand, feels like whether he sees that and feels like he can't match that, or feels that and feels like he's only impersonating his brother. Yeah. There's a really funny line about that later in the film. But how he holds his mouth, it feels like he's never truly ready to talk. That there's a step that has to happen before he talks. I thought that was really cool.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I picked that up too about the jaw. The way you're describing it makes me think about something you pointed out when we talked about John Cazale. That, when in The Godfather Part 2, the way he holds his jaw, it's almost as if he's trying to resemble Vito Corleone.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, to resemble his father. But, you might as well talk a little bit about something that Jeremy Irons specifically points out on the commentary about his acting technique here, which is that, he uses something called the Alexander technique to find different energy points to convey the characters. And so for Beverly, that point was the Adam's apple. And then for Elliot, it's the forehead. Once you know that, I mean, like, you kind of can't unhear it. But even before he made that distinction, I could see that there were physical subtleties that distinguished them. I think that, understandably, the first viewing was very hard to tell that. Second viewing, I think that it became progressively easier to tell. And, granted, the happenings of both characters diverge as the movie goes along. So there are more things than him simply his performance. There are things about the writing and the plotting that helped draw that distinction as well. But even before those things become salient, I could tell from some of those details. Also, some aspects of costuming.
Yeah.
That I think initially that
definitely
Elliot has like the stronger, starker presentation, more like blacks and reds. And Beverly has more muted colors. There's like a big like gray overcoat that he's wearing at some point. And
there's
I noticed
like a white sweater like that he also wears too at home. Yeah.
And as his descent into addiction occurs, there are points where the costuming for Elliot or the costuming for Beverly, look at that, cognitive dissonance, where the costuming for Beverly gets a little darker. Like that scene when he's thrown on a coat and he's walking outside the exhibit that features all those tools. But then, so like second viewing, part of it's just getting back into the groove of the movie at, a year after first seeing it. But like the beginning of the movie, I find it difficult to distinguish between the two. And even on a third watch with the commentary, there were still some points where I was like, wait, who is it again? Who is it?
Yeah.
But then I think the third watch was definitely, even with that little bit of difficulty in telling them apart in some scenes, I think that was, even before I knew the specific energy points, I could tell the differences the best then. So I think gradually it becomes easier to distinguish Beverly and Elliot on repeated viewings with or without the knowledge of the specific energy points that Jeremy Irons chose.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously easiest to tell the difference between them when they're in a scene together. That's pretty much never confusing.
Yeah.
Mostly just because of the characterization and like how these scenes are written. But I do also think that there is, I almost feel like he exaggerates slightly more when they are in a scene together. It feels like, I again, I'm kind of thinking of the scene where Claire is confronting them. Like, Elliot he says that he's a couple millimeters taller.
I love that line.
But I think that this may just be a joke, but he holds himself so much taller.
He does.
And part of that is just confidence. I think that's noticeable throughout the entire film, but I think particularly in this scene, how like kind of elongated his torso is. And I think part of that points to the energy point that you're talking about, because when you're thinking about putting your energy in the forehead, like that is the highest point of your body, right? Whereas putting the energy in your Adam's apple is slumping you, and it's bringing the jaw clenching that you were talking about. So I think a lot of it is posture.
Totally.
One scene that I found really interesting that I wanted to get your thoughts on is after Beverly has botched this surgery, and Beverly is supposed to appear in front of like the hospital board, but he is in no state to do that. So Elliot impersonates him in front of the hospital board.
Yep.
And I was wondering if you guys noticed that immediately, that it was Elliot impersonating him. And if so, if that was because of just narratively, it makes sense that he would, or if it was something in the performance.
I caught it because he throws in that line about professional jealousy.
Yeah.
That does not feel like something that Beverly would go towards. And whereas Elliot is like, I'm going to throw this back in y'all's face.
And not just the nature of the line, but the way he delivers it too. It feels, a little bit too scripted. For the situation. To answer your question, Madeline, yes, I did catch it on, I can't really remember what was going through my head the first viewing last year, but the first of the two rewatches I did for this episode, yes, I did, because I could see the energy was different. Yeah. Maybe I wasn't looking at the forehead, but the energy was different. The vocal delivery was different. And yes, these lines, they just didn't sound like something that Beverly would say, especially in the state that he was left in.
I think it's one of Jeremy Irons' best moments, because I do think that even before you know something is off. I think it's pretty clear that it's not Beverly.
Right.
But it's not so obvious in that he's not just playing this as Elliot. He's playing this as Elliot trying to be Beverly, but fighting against his own instincts. He, I think, still has the energy in the forehead because Elliot as a character is not thinking like, oh, I need to move my energy to my Adam's apple. Like that's just where his energy lives, right? So then he has to kind of shrink himself slightly, but it's like he's physically incapable of coming down from that place.
Right. I think he also speaks of this incident that necessitated the whole review in a really
like detached
manner. Exactly. Yeah. Whereas I think somebody like Beverly would feel like he'd have to answer for more.
Yeah.
And
like
he's just like
maybe at least play remorse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I'll tell you where, even though I watched it endless times, it was tough for me to figure out in the first couple interactions with Claire, which one was which.
Totally.
There is one in particular. I still am like, I don't know exactly which one it was, which is when Elliot says, then I'm going to take her for myself. He's like, well, you got to tell me, baby brother. Like, it didn't really happen until you tell me, that type thing.
Yeah.
And there's a cutaway right after that to them getting it on. And I can't tell in that moment, honestly, which one is which, because I feel like there's a read on it where you could totally say it's Elliot, but you also could totally say it's Beverly because Beverly felt challenged in that moment.
Yeah.
And so you're like, are we seeing Elliot? Are we seeing Beverly? I think it's the one moment in the movie where I really couldn't tell you with 100% certainty which one it is.
I think a lot of those early Claire scenes, it is kind of difficult.
Yeah, and I think it's supposed to be. And like the scene for me where I really think about that, it's not a Claire scene, but it's still in that portion of the movie that there's a point where, you know, the two of them are in their, I mean, we got to talk about the set of their apartment is a really, really great set.
Yeah.
Feels like very in keeping with the visual aesthetics of like Videodrome.
Yeah.
Totally.
Like the muted blues in the lighting of it, or maybe even just the way it's painted. But there's a scene where this is the only moment where I really have a tough time telling them apart, where I believe it's that Beverly comes home and Elliot is sitting at the table, like either eating dinner or watching TV or something. But there's a crucial line in the movie that's said during that scene, which is, you haven't had any experience until I've had it too. And it could be either one of them who's saying it. But I believe that it's Elliot sitting at the table saying that.
Yeah, 100%.
I felt that in a big way. But I feel like Beverly is not brash enough to say something like that.
I think he's coming from having been with Claire at this point.
Yes.
And she says to him, again, not knowing that Elliot exists, just from like she's a celebrity kind of standpoint. She says to him right after they have finished having sex, don't tell anyone.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he says like, oh, who do I have to tell? Like, oh. So then in the very next scene where Elliot is like, come on, tell me. And Beverly, maybe for the first time, seemingly is like, no. Like, this is for me. And I think part of that comes from the fact that she directly asked him, like, not to tell anybody. So I like that scene a lot. I think that says a lot about the fact that Beverly is trying to extricate himself to a certain extent, like have something for just him.
Yeah. So my read on that scene was correct. But I think what confused me about it was that, like, the way that it feels like a role reversal is that, like, Beverly's the one who has to present himself somewhere, and Elliot's the one who's at home doing the more introverted thing at that point.
I think it's just because they're sleeping with the same lady and they're trading off. You know, somebody has to stay home.
I'm also going to say one other thing, which is what he's watching on TV is what he watches later, which is Lifestyles of the Rich and the Famous. Yes. His favorite TV show. I do think it's Elliot at the table.
Yeah. Okay. And also,
so you're good. You got it. Yeah.
The costuming justifies this too, that Elliot is in like a bright red robe or something at that point, and Beverly's in that kind of drab overcoat. But, you know, still that line, you haven't had any experience, or excuse me, you haven't had any experience until I've had it too. That is one of the definitive lines of the whole movie. And it's also like, you don't see this as much coming from Elliot. It shows more later on, but that there's a codependency from him too, despite all the confidence he projects.
Yeah. I also think we've talked a lot about the kind of beginning chunk in the movie.
Yeah.
But I think the last act also, once Elliot has also started succumbing to addiction, it is nearly impossible, I think, to tell them apart because they've both... I forget what exactly the line is when Elliot says, "Oh, we just have to get synchronized."
Yeah, right.
It's like they have gotten
watches.
synchronized
yeah.
To the nth degree. So except when they explicitly are calling each other by name in like the last 10 minutes, I think there's basically no distinction.
Jeremy Irons noted on the commentary that there are, I think he said it a little hesitantly, I think there are maybe only 10 shots in the whole film where you see the two characters together. And I counted it after he made that note, and indeed there are exactly 10 shots in the movie where you see two of Jeremy Irons in the same frame. And one of those, I think, is one of those shots. Like most of them, it's easy to tell the distinction, like that tracking shot earlier in the movie where they're both walking into, I think, a cafeteria together.
Yep.
But the one where I find them hard to tell apart is the second to last shot of the two of them, where they are like, they're both under the influence and they're like in basically the same outfit and one's walking in front of the other.
I love that shot.
Me too.
That's a good one. That's a real good one. I also really love the one right after Beverly is malpracticing all over the place. And it's a really close pan back and forth between them.
Yep.
Also really
cool.
good. There is a moment where they are both briefly in frame together on a technical level, like really very well done.
Definitely.
Yes, and we should take a moment to shout out, not to be confused with a film that I mentioned during Not to be Confused, the body double for Jeremy Irons in the film, who I'm looking for his name right now.
In the credits, and I don't have the credits in front of me, but in the credits, I noticed that there is photo double and also performance double, both credited, and that they are different people. So I would guess that whose body we actually see on screen, I would guess is the performance double.
Yes, and I mean, I'm struggling. I'm looking on the Wikipedia. I can't find his name, but Jeremy Irons said that at least his first name is John.
Yeah, that much I do remember.
On the commentary. We got to give a shout out to John the performance double.
Definitely.
John the performance double. I like that.
Dougie does a lot of stand-in work, which is slightly different than performance doubling. But I told him, because he did not listen to the commentary with me, I told him, you really should listen to this commentary because Jeremy Irons is really, really reverential towards John, his performance double, just because I think he is so respectful of the amount of craft that goes into this work in a way that I don't know that all actors would be. And I think it's really lovely.
Absolutely.
There's a clip I saw in a making of documentary of this where you can see John and him. And I think it's that scene of them walking into the cafeteria.
Yeah, I think I've seen this too.
Yeah. And it's like he's got a little bit longer hair. At least it's styled to be a little bit longer. And I do think that this body double was doing a really nice job of walking in a manner that I think Beverly would have. Because I think he was standing in for Beverly at that time. And so, shout out, man. John the body double.
Yeah. And that Jeremy Irons mentions in the commentary too, that like anytime for any one of those 10 shots where the twins both appear, that like the camera was very carefully guarded. There was a perimeter around it, and that people couldn't move the camera. They couldn't change the lighting.
Yeah.
As they did separate takes because it was necessary to do separate takes. And also that I think he was saying about the tracking shot too, that it's like your timing has to be very accurate.
Motorized. It's all computer
that's the thing. It's not just about timing. It's that it's a motion control camera, which is popularized by George Lucas in Star Wars.
Yeah.
And it is designed to repeat the exact same movement.
Mm-hmm. There's that, but then other scenes too where there's like a little bit of movement in the camera, like the back and forth you were talking about, Emilio. Walking is crucial for the timing, but speaking as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all to underscore the technical brilliance of Jeremy Irons' two performances.
Yeah, I think there's another one too that I'm thinking of. Sorry, before we move away from it, I think it's Beverly is under the sheets and Elliot is trying to instruct him on what type of drugs he's supposed to take.
Yeah,
and I could be wrong, but I feel like there's another one. It's a pan, and Beverly's more in the background, and then it pans, and Elliot is in the foreground. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's even like a rack focus in that scene, which had to have been just crazy to time as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, kudos, man. On a technical level, it is very cool. When I think about why this movie didn't work for me as well, this movie feels a little stuck in the technical place.
It's a very new technology.
Yeah. And I think to that point, there is this curiosity of like, can we pull this off?
Yeah, what is possible?
Can Jeremy Irons do all of this that I think the movie is in some ways eager to portray? And I would argue that there are elements of the story that suffer perhaps because there are these technical things that are trying to get pulled off.
It's funny you say that though, because I do think that despite the technical feats of it, that this is one of, at least of the films I've seen, I'm not saying that Cronenberg is a flashy director in general, but it's definitely on the flashiness scale, one of the least flashy films of his I've seen.
Yeah, and I do think the technical elements of this movie do age really, really well.
Yeah, also the fact that it's like, we've acknowledged a little bit about the time in which it's set, but there's not a lot to like hammer it in that it's the 1980s. Mm-hmm. There's only one guy you see with a mullet at that big dinner that Beverly has that drunken outburst at.
Guilty as charged.
You were talking about the technical craft. One like deleted scene that I learned about because one of the featurettes on your DVD, Julian, is with the special effects makeup artist, who is mostly not a special effects guy. He's mostly just a regular makeup artist. But he does the scene where the two of them are like conjoined and Claire has to like chew through it in a dream or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's this deleted scene where they were going to have this kind of like atrophied twin growing out of one of them, and then they built this full animatronic like atrophied twin, which I found a picture of on Twitter here.
Oh my god.
Oh, wow.
And basically what this special effects artist says is that the only reason they had to cut this is because this thing did not work. Oh. Basically, Cronenberg, he wanted it to be animatronic and he wanted it to look as much like Jeremy Irons as possible. So they basically cast him.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then just like shrink it repeatedly. And then have to do all the animatronics inside, but something like melted inside and like messed up all of the electronics. And so when they went to use it, it like moved in like ultra slow motion. Oh. And they opened
just
it up and they
effective.
were like, apparently urethane melted inside. So it was just like a huge clump of urethane when they opened the thing up. But it's really incredible. I highly recommend watching that featurette because they do show you just a few quick shots of this like crazy like little atrophied tiny Jeremy Irons. It's so insane that they built this and then it did not work and they could not use it.
Wow. There was a third one.
I find it such a bummer that technically they couldn't pull it off.
Yeah, I will quickly read you guys the excerpt that I found on Twitter. So Beverly is like kissing a woman who, and this is identified as Kate. I don't know if that's supposed to be Claire. And then something starts like growing out of his pajamas and it ends up being this atrophied twin who now speaks and says, "No, don't kiss him. I'm the real Beverly. Kiss me."
Oh my gosh.
He forces me to live as a parasite, but someday I'll pull myself free. I'll be free. And then the parasite places its tiny hands on Beverly's hips for leverage, then with a huge effort rips himself out of Beverly's body.
Wow. I will say that dream sequence was the most Cronenberg I feel this movie gets.
I literally word for word wrote that exact same thing in my notes.
Yeah.
But if this scene stayed in, that
would have
be
taken
the
cake.
Cronenberg scene.
Well, there are, when you consider like Cronenberg's talents with things that aren't horror, so directly. I mean, I don't know if I would say it is the most Cronenberg scene of the movie, but I do agree that it's, him doing his trademark thing for just one moment. I thought of that scene a little bit like in A Simple Plan when there's the shotgun recoil.
Oh yeah.
That's like the
blows back into the cabinets.
The one moment where Sam Raimi can't resist to put his thing in the movie, and this is like, that to A Simple Plan is like what this is to Dead Ringers.
Totally.
It's so effective though. I've never forgotten that moment from that film.
Yeah,
that's a great movie, man. That's a real good one.
I agree. It's a very well placed use of the Raimi thing.
I'm with you. That was good pull.
Totally. We've talked a lot about the presence of twins in this movie, and we've spent a lot of time praising the expert skills that Jeremy Irons brings to the performance. But there's also, even if these characters weren't exactly identical, there is a prominent theme of brotherhood in the film as a familial bond. And Beverly and Elliot, they go against each other in many ways, but they're never in a full-on rivalry. It's never all-out war between the two of them.
Yeah.
And they acknowledge their deep dependence on one another when it really matters. Through Cronenberg and Norman Snyder's script, as well as the Jeremy Irons performance, like, how do we interpret the portrayal of brotherhood in this film?
I mean, we first meet Beverly and Elliot as children that are dressed exactly alike.
Yes.
Which, by the way, I went to college with twins that dressed alike. I did not really know them. They were a little younger than me, but they were known as like the twins that dress alike. And again, they're like 19 at this point. They still dressed alike.
Wow.
Isn't this didn't this come up in one of our high school episodes?
Perhaps it did, but I went to high school with twins that I'd say are a little more Beverly Elliot.
I think that was what came up.
They did not dress alike by my own memory.
Yeah.
But I did go to college with female twins that dressed alike. Anyway, we meet Beverly and Elliot as children dressed alike, and they have this like awkward and inappropriate interaction that you mentioned earlier with this little girl named Rafaela, and I think it kind of seems to imply that they may not fit in that well with their peers.
Also their accents. Like they're always the ones with the British accent.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, it's a little bit like Olivia Hussey in Black Christmas, where it's like no one says anything about the accent.
Yeah, but she's an adult. Yeah. And so I think presumably she has chosen to come to America for college, whereas these are children who I guess...
And they have time to work that out of them by that point.
Yeah.
If they are sticking around.
But maybe they're new on the block.
That may be so.
And then they also have this shared interest in anatomy even as kids. And if they aren't really connecting with other kids, then they're likely developing this like deep dependency on each other, even at this really young age. And then they get older and they move through their lives together. They go to college together. They develop the mantle retractor together. They return to Toronto and open their practice together. They live together even well into adulthood. And so all these steps that adults normally would take alone, they take as a pair. And so they're intertwining their personal and professional lives. And then when Beverly wants to kind of keep something to himself, it's nearly impossible. So I think so much of the brotherhood element of this, like, goes beyond typical brotherhood or even typical twindom in the fact that they have seemingly done everything together their entire lives.
I really liked your question because I think it does get to one of the things that felt a little funny about this movie, which is that I feel like this movie has a detached relationship with the idea of brotherhood.
Yeah.
It's so specifically about these identical twins that have this strong codependency, that have this really specific profession that they all go in. And it kind of feels like it's written in a lab to set up this story. And I know that it's based on a real life set of identical twins, but there's something that is very exceptional about this. I struggle to think about, as you mentioned and laid out here, Madeline, something that even feels kind of relatable on a brother level. It's very specific.
And to what you're saying, the real life twins that these characters are based off of, Stewart and Cyril Marcus. So when they were in residency at Mount Sinai, the chairman of their program did not think it was wise for them to practice together.
Right.
And he would not recommend them to the same hospital.
Yeah.
I think because he likely observed a very similar codependency that would be detrimental to patients. And so they actually ended up having to kind of find a different person that they could, convince
Vouch
and who would
them,
be
yeah.
sympathetic to their cause to practice together. But to this exact point, it's like, even the real life people these characters are based off of had to kind of like go against the system in a way to be able to recreate this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I've been thinking too about like what David Cronenberg and others involved in the movie purported to portray, in making a movie about twins. And it was acknowledged by Cronenberg as well as the producer of the movie, Mark Boyman, who briefly appears as...
With the costume designer. Is it the one on the phone?
The one on the phone.
I think he's her assistant.
Assistant, yeah. And that they acknowledged that a lot of times when there had been twins portrayed in film up until that point, that it was either comical, as in the original Parent Trap, or there was like kind of a Jekyll and Hyde element, that like one of them is maybe the more straight-laced, the other is some kind of scary presence.
Mm-hmm.
And that they wanted to create something that was truer to real life in the portrayal of twins and dead ringers, or if not true to real life, not fulfilling those functions from other films, something that is more muted and with characters with real personalities. And it's acknowledged too that, like, I think, yet again, Jeremy Irons says something in the commentary about how there are like many different, and maybe Cronenberg said it somewhere in the special features as well, about how there are many different pairs of twins in the real world where it's like, the only main association between them is the fact that they're twins. They're not very alike otherwise. And it's a spectrum. And I think that one of the details that really interests me about the joint portrayal of Beverly and Elliot is that as the film goes along, Beverly is at his lowest point in this addiction spiral, but then he reconnects with Claire, and there's a little time lapse there. And then we don't see Elliot descend into his addiction spiral, but it happens too.
Yeah.
And I think, part of that's just an economical screenwriting decision that we know what it looks like with one character. Like, it doesn't have to go out of the way to establish that another character is going through the same thing. But what interests me about this is that this is where you see what would seem to be a hereditary tendency come into play. No, they don't have the same personality, but something scientific there beyond the fact of them being identical.
Like a predilection to that sort of addiction.
Yes, it rhymed. Nice. That unites their shared experiences, and then being both in the throes of addiction together, it definitely doesn't resolve anything, but for once in their shared arc, they can be on kind of the same page.
Yeah. I mean, there are genetic factors to addiction, so I do think that kind of plays a part here as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Definitely.
Can I ask you guys a question? So I've already been on record stating that this movie kind of lost me at some point. I feel like this movie chooses the wrong guy to go mad. I feel like this movie would take a more interesting tone if it's Elliot that has this kind of awakening. And I think it goes back sort of to what I was saying before. If we're thinking about brothers and we're thinking about their sort of relationship to one another, something that really fascinates me and something that I think Cronenberg would actually be a really great director for is if it's the guy who seems like he has it all together that is the one to crumble, and then the one that seems to be more sensitive, that detachment, he has an understanding of that then causes this sort of flip in the characters. The comp that I'm thinking about here is to a film that we all talked about before. And I actually thought this was a real strength of this film as it was happening, is Shallow Grave. Mm-hmm. That you think the Ewan McGregor character is the one who's
the asshole. Which he is, but like not.
Totally, 100. But his character realizes that when a pivotal thing happens, he actually kind of goes the other way.
Yeah.
And that the Eccleston character is the one who responds in an opposite way.
Yeah.
That both of them are living with these intense insecurities, but that it kind of splinters off in this other direction. I couldn't help but, as I was not connecting with the second half of this movie, wonder how it would be if it went the other way.
I see what you mean, but I also am kind of like, I almost feel like that would have been more expected from my perspective, partly because Elliot, as the more outgoing twin. He seems to be the one that is living a little larger. He's the one that goes after experiences. And so he feels like the one that perhaps would have a higher likelihood of encountering drugs.
Yeah.
So so I think the fact that it is the more timid twin who hasn't really, lived outside of the experiences that his brother has built for him, then has this experience that's completely separate from them for the first time in either of their lives, with a person that's completely separate from them and that's new to them and that's just his now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of what the movie is going for.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I could see that. I also just feel like the drug angle for me, it feels like a manifestation that could be any number of things.
Yeah, you're totally right.
I never really felt like it had to be drugs. Like, I think the drugs are a nice tangible thing that the movie can go to and point. So maybe that's why I didn't think of it when I thought of that. But I see your point. It's good.
I see yours too.
Well, are we ready to go to some little details that we enjoyed about the movie now?
Totally.
Let's get into it.
We haven't said very much about the tools.
Yeah, the tools are terrifying.
They are wacky as fuck.
Yeah. And I was saying something to Madeline when we were talking about the movie before recording that it's like, it just made me think a lot of like an H.R. Giger type of design.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I don't think that he ever worked with Cronenberg, but they would have been such a great match.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Almost like the world would have imploded if it did,
It's too perfect to exist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. While we're speaking of the tools, part of the reason Julian and I were talking about the tools is because I mentioned that I watched the featurette on the Shout Factory Blu-ray with Stephen Lack, who plays Anders Wallach.
Oh yeah,
he's so cool. Like this featurette is maybe my favorite on the whole DVD, even though it maybe has the least to do with the movie itself. Just because Stephen Lack seems like cool as hell and like a person I would want to hang out with.
Is he like an actual artist,
or
is it just his vibe?
He's an actual artist. I think he's primarily an artist.
Okay,
he's like
cool.
a longtime friend of Cronenberg's. I think he's maybe is also in Scanners.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And Cronenberg calls him up.
I think you're right. I think he is in Scanners.
Cronenberg calls him up and is like, I have this part for you.
But with those tools as designed by the artist Anders Wallach, they're like an interesting tendency that comes up around one of the scenes with them is that like Beverly, it occurs several times throughout the film that Beverly has a tendency to project or to like make up certain scenarios that when he thinks that Claire is cheating on him and he says so on the phone, even though there's not really any direct evidence of that. It's just that she's going away for work.
It's like a man answered the telephone in her hotel room. A man that is very clearly gay.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Like, come on, man.
Yeah. There's also...
I know it's the 80s, but come on.
Yeah. But there's also a scene, like you pointed it out earlier, Madeline, when like, ostensibly due to hallucinations that Beverly's claiming that he's seeing these strange mutations of bodies, and we as viewers get no confirmation of that. And then he claims that the tools are his designs that have been stolen.
Yes.
When he he himself
went to
steals
the guy.
them.
Yeah.
Well, when there's an attendant at the gallery who tries to keep him from doing that.
She's trying her best.
That scene kind of gave me agita because the tools themselves are so like sharp, and they're like scrambling and trying to grab for him, and I just was like
stuffing them in his pockets. And, like, down his pants.
Someone is gonna require stitches after this take.
And I as someone with a very acute sense of object permanence, I felt for that gallery attendant there.
100%.
Seeing that happen,
100%.
it's just that's like an object permanence nightmare happening.
Yeah. So there's a scene towards, I'm going to say it's kind of the start of the end of the film. I can't remember exactly where it is. Maybe a little after an hour in. There was a really nice scene and moment that happens with Jeremy Irons as Beverly and Heidi von Palaska as Carrie. And there's a scene that comes before, but it was the first time where I really went like, we know that Beverly and Elliot have been very predatory towards women.
Yeah.
But that maybe there's some women out there who really are into this shit too.
And
because she gives him this energy, there's this great thing of like where she puts her hand and how Jeremy Irons kind of moves it, and she kind of finds this middle place for it.
Yeah.
And there's this like real interesting back and forth with how they dance that I thought was really good. I wanted to shout it out because it brought up all these things that I thought were kind of interesting.
Totally.
Yeah. And then that Beverly is on the couch. That's one of those 10 shots where they both appear in the same frame where Beverly's on the couch while Elliot is dancing. with Carrie. And that maybe is the image that stuck with me the most from the first viewing.
Yeah, it's a great shot.
Yeah, and also that song too. Neither of you have seen Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, have you?
I have not yet.
So I watched this in like the weirdest way possible, which is the George Lucas talk show, which is not actually hosted by George Lucas, is hosted by comedian Connor Ratliff playing George Lucas and fellow film podcaster Griffin Newman playing Watto. It's a whole thing. Anyway, during COVID, they would often do watch-alongs for various movies because what else was there to do? And so they did The Irishman at one point. It was like an ongoing joke that one day they were going to do The Irishman, and they finally did The Irishman. So I had The Irishman on like in the background on mute while watching the George Lucas talk show because I was mostly watching that. So I'd say no, I've not seen The Irishman.
But that song.
That is an incredible setup, by the way.
That song, though, in the Still of the Night features prominently in that movie.
All right, so I would not know that because I had it on mute.
Yeah, but that like The Irishman drilled that song into me, and so when I see it come up in Dead Ringers, which came first, I'm still like, oh yeah, it's that song again. Madeline, do you have any little details you want to shout out?
I love when Claire is in the makeup truck.
And so good. I know you're going to say.
Elliot comes to visit her and she's in profile and he's speaking with her and all seems totally normal. And then she turns her face and you see that she's got like gore makeup on the side of her face that you have not been able to see. Yeah. I just think it's such a cool reveal.
I love it too.
And I think that the guy applying the makeup may have been the special effects artist that is interviewed on this Blu-ray just because they look like the same
like the bearded
person.
guy?
The bearded guy.
Yeah, okay.
I did not actually check this, but they look like the same person.
I want to shout out another moment that feels kind of akin to that. There's a scene where I think it's Beverly that's trashing their office, and there's a moment where you see him shaving.
Oh yeah,
and there's this like really interesting pan as he's shaving, and I felt like it was this great little redirect because you think you're going to turn around and see him gashed out.
Yeah, you think he's going to cut himself.
Yeah, it really just leaves you with this funky visual of him just covered in shaving cream. Yeah. And for the whole movie, you've been looking at this guy's face to try to discern whether it's Elliot or Beverly or Elliot. And now there's this added layer that's on top that feels like he's kind of trying to cut through. It's just like a really great visual that I think says a lot more than just what you see.
Yeah. And going back to like, portrayals of the face of Jeremy Irons and also specifically to that makeup trailer scene that you mentioned, Madeline, that I think what you see of Elliot there's almost like a Hitchcockian thing that's done where you see half of his face is in shadow. It makes me think about some of the lighting on Anthony Perkins in Psycho as Norman Bates. That
they all go a little mad sometimes.
Yes.
Right.
Speaking of expressive aspects of this movie, we haven't said very much about the medical robes yet. The bright red.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
They look like the robes of Emperor Palpatine's Imperial Guards.
Yeah.
I was getting
Star Wars.
I was getting some Eyes Wide Shut vibes
that
too.
was what I thought of.
Yeah. I see that too. But that there was something I think that like Jeremy Irons said it about David Cronenberg on the commentary that like he didn't want the medical robes to be white, just the plain appearance. And I think he didn't really want there to be any shades of green in the movie either for whatever reason. Funny enough, Cronenberg appears in a green outfit in his cameo in The Fly.
Oh yeah, he does.
Yeah, which is as a doctor.
Right.
So then Jeremy Irons assumed that preparing for the role in that a lot of doctors that there's kind of like a shared code of conduct or, shared set of principles with them. And Cronenberg argued, no, a lot of them are their own entities. Mm-hmm. And so that for that reason that these doctors would choose to wear these oddly...
These kind of theatrical,
ceremonial robes.
Yeah.
I mean, my thought is, why do we make surgeons wear white when white is going to show the most blood and other fluids that you might get on your robe while in surgery? And red does not have that problem. I mean, neither would black, but red's more fun.
Well, I guess accuracy as to what's really going on in the surgery, maybe that's a part of an argument for the white.
You put it about as good as I could. Yeah. But your point also stands.
It's like, I guess if things are going bad, you want to know exactly how bad.
I mean, I've never been in a surgery room in Canada. So.
Maybe they do things differently north of the border. Yeah.
I guess this is a little detail which could kind of lead into unlikely shared universe, although if anyone else has other stuff, that's totally fine as well. Apparently, the little girl that plays Rafaela does the voice of a lead character in a series that is very near and dear to my heart specifically. Madeline.
No way.
She is Madeline in the Madeline films. She does 6 Madeline movies in the span of 3 years, starting this very year, 1998, with Madeline, full stop, of 1988. And she does voices for 6 films through, I think, 1991.
I'm glad she wasn't typecast.
Yeah,
because the line that she delivers in this movie, not something that the Madeline of that series would say.
Yeah.
That's great, though. That's so cool. I like that.
Yeah,
wow.
She goes on to do like other voice acting, like a lot of Little Bear, I think, is like a big one for her after she moves on from Madeline. And I totally remember Little Bear as a little human. But I thought that was very cool because, if you're just looking through IMDb, you're like, oh, all of these people that don't have photos on IMDb, probably this is one of very few movies for them. But I was just very curious about her, and I was delighted to find out that she does voice me.
It's been her this whole time on this podcast.
Exactly. Hello, my name is Rafaela. So yes, that actress's name is Marsha Moreau.
Shout out Marsha Moreau.
Hi, Marsha Moreau.
Yeah, very cool. On that note, there were 2 other castings that jumped out to me. The identical twin escorts. One of them is Jill Hennessy,
right?
Crossing Jordan.
Oh,
this meaningful to anybody here?
I've not seen that, but I did recognize her.
Yeah, it was kind of cool to see.
I think this is her film debut.
Very nice. It's very memorable. And also just the whole him asking to be one of them to call him Elliot, another to call him Beverly. It's like there is weight to that scene. So it's 100%. Very cool that that she's in it. And then one other one, all just kind of on the thread that you started here, Madeline, one that jumped out to me. So Laura is the name of the friend. Mm-hmm. She's played by Shirley Douglas. Shirley Douglas was briefly married to Donald Sutherland, and they had a child whose name is Kiefer Sutherland.
You may have heard of him.
Yes. So I always find it really interesting sometimes when you see the parents of an actor, because sometimes you look at them and you're like, where's their kid? Where's their kid in that?
Well, it's funny because as soon as she has such like a regality to her,
she does,
that as soon as she comes on screen, I am kind of like, who is this?
Yeah.
I assumed that this was like a golden age actor that I wasn't familiar with.
Yeah.
And I was incorrect about that, but she does still, I think, have this regality that you pick up on that makes sense that she is so ingrained in Hollywood.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, I guess, to close off little details, I've just got 2 brief moments of comic relief in the movie that I want to shout out.
Okay.
Let's go.
Are also kind of have to do with the same thing. That was a good setup because after the scene, when Claire realizes that she has been meeting with identical twins, that, she's confronting Beverly about this. And she says, I heard that you live in the same apartment. And then Beverly goes, yeah, that's true. We both like Italian furniture. And then there's a scene where, so later on in the throes of his addiction spiral, Beverly's been locked in the apartment by Elliot, and then concocts a little scheme to get the doorman to come and let him out.
Oh, that's a fun scene, yeah.
Yeah. And so then the doorman asks, or, whatever he is, he asks, what's going on in there? And then Beverly says, endless renovations.
I think the first time I watched the movie, I was confused about this scene because I'm like, I know there are doors that exist that lock from the outside and you cannot unlock from the inside, but there's not that many of that kind of door. Like normally the way doors work is that if you're inside, you can control the lock. So I was a little confused about this the first time I watched it. I mean, they've got to get him out somehow. I guess he could just walk out the door. But then you have to kind of be like, why didn't Elliot take more measures to secure him?
All right.
So I guess the logic is just that this is a door that you cannot unlock from the inside.
Big takeaway. Yeah. That's what that is.
Yeah. Wonder if it says anything about, a doctor having that kind of door.
I have to say too, that you're talking about comedic relief. I know this is a scene in the movie where you're supposed to really feel for them, but like the mention of orange pop and ice cream.
See,
I don't know.
I 100%. It is so silly. I agree with you.
It's like really silly.
But weirdly, this was one of those moments that made me so sad.
Oh, man.
There's something about the like reverting to the childlike state. Like him, I recognize this is ridiculous of him. Like I think it's Elliot like crying to be like, we're out of ice cream. Like mommy forgot to pick up ice cream.
Yeah.
There was just a moment of me really feeling, not specifically for Elliot, but just like the idea of a person who is incapacitated in some way and just wants like some small pleasure and like can't even have that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the intention, and it did work for me, but it is so ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And I was not there with this movie for that to land. I was waiting for the two of them to be dead. And so I was like...
Neither of you have seen the movie The Father that Anthony Hopkins won his second Oscar for, right?
No, but I was so tempted to be like, well, you see, the George Lucas talk show had this thing where...
But that movie is like no shortage of moments like that one.
I understand that from at least having seen the trailer for that movie.
Yeah, it's definitely...
That's the kind of thing I was thinking about, is like an older person, a person maybe with dementia or like a similar kind of disease. Like that's more what I was, I think, telegraphing this onto mentally.
All right, are we ready for Unlikely Shared Universe?
As ready as we will ever be.
All right, well, this has been a whole conversation largely about Jeremy Irons. Can I continue that wave?
Go for it.
All right. So, at the conclusion of the shared story of Beverly and Elliot Mantle, it is empirically confirmed that Elliot is dead by disembowelment, and Beverly's joining him in a seemingly lifeless pose would seem to communicate that he too has joined Elliot in the choir eternal. However, what if Beverly has not in fact died, but is simply engaging in a final act of supposed kinship? Despite his guileless appearance, Beverly has learned a thing or two over time from his brother's tactics of manipulation, and though he is appropriately distraught by the result of his drug-induced act of fratricide, his resolution is not to accept his downfall, but instead to skip town and flee to the United States before Elliot's body is discovered. Having called in some favors with some high-up friends in the medical world, Beverly is able to reinvent himself in the United States. But to avoid any potential discovery of his wrongdoing, his reinvention is not as a doctor, but as a businessman in the world of investment banking. Known by the new name John Told, the man who has shed the mantle of Beverly quickly rises high.
Did you do that on purpose?
Shed the mantle?
Yes, I did. The man who has shed. Let me.
Unintended.
You didn't emphasize it enough.
Sometimes I like to be subtle.
Yeah, you gotta let it. What is it? It's a homer. You get it on the way home.
Yeah. Well, in the words of Josh Peck, let me repeat it for emphasis. The man who has shed the mantle of Beverly quickly rises high in the world of banking and eventually becomes a CEO who seems quite comfortable in his profession, even if the trauma of his past has resulted in a nihilistic outlook. Though John Told sails smoothly as a CEO for quite some time, the year 2008 throws a wrench in his stability when a laid-off employee from his firm quietly blows the whistle about an impending mountain of debt from highly volatile mortgage-backed securities. When this information spreads from one employee to another in an overnight panic, John Told himself is eventually called in to determine how this company will deal with a seemingly unavoidable financial catastrophe. It seems like, Emilio, you made a gesture that says to me you know what this is.
I do know what this
I
is.
know it. I just always forget the name of this movie.
Margin Call.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. I just saw it a few months ago.
It's good. It's fun, right?
This is like, as someone who is not in or of the world of finance, it's a really engaging movie.
Oh, totally. It's got a great cast too. Like,
yeah.
Just down the line, all just assassins. Yeah.
Yeah. It would make a great stage play too.
Totally.
It was made in 2011, shortly after the 2008 financial collapse. It's a great example of something that's both in the time and has just aged really well. The Big Short, I think, has had some very rightful influence on many films after it, but I feel like The Big Short must have in its own way been responding a Margin Call. There's definitely they're in dialogue with one another.
Yeah, I get these movies mixed up.
Yeah, but yeah, great movie, Margin Call. And Jeremy Irons plays a CEO in it.
As he should.
Yeah.
Give him all the roles. Yes. And have him play multiple roles in every movie.
All right, cool. I can go next. Mine is dumb, but I had fun writing it.
Go for it.
Yes, do it.
So at the hospital pharmacy, we see Elliot write and fill a prescription for butazamine for Claire. He originally calls the pharmacist Arthur, but the pharmacist corrects him and says that his name is Dennis. Elliot responds by apologizing and saying he always gets him confused, which is like a very weird comment that I caught the second time. And I was like, is this racist? I'm not sure. But we're going to ignore that. And we're going to say, actually, Elliot is confused because this pharmacist has been giving him a different name every time they meet. You see, his real name is Shinji, and it's in his best interest to keep his true identity hidden. Because Shinji is an assassin that has been sent here from the year 2021 to ensure that Elliot Mantle indeed meets his grisly fate that we see at the end of this film. Having knowledge of Claire's drug problem, he poses as the hospital pharmacist and turns the other way as Elliot and Beverly both write and fill prescriptions for drugs they end up abusing. But this was just a single job for Shinji. So he returns to the year 2021 and moves on to the next assassination. Although he was working independently in the job to kill Elliot, Shinji is actually a Yakuza.
Yeah.
And his gang has been hired by a mega corporation to suppress sensitive data that is being transported through a courier's brain implant. He's sent to Beijing, and with a trusty laser whip in hand, he kills the scientists as they're encrypting the data in the courier's implant. However, the courier can hold his own against Shinji and the rest of the Yakuza and manages to escape with the data. Shinji must then face his boss, Takahashi, and admit his failure to recover the data, and the gang must re-strategize. Shinji begins to feel like his last assignment as an undercover pharmacist was much less dangerous. But at least this time he gets to wield his laser whip.
I'm stumped here.
I do know this, and I forgot about this movie until I was researching for this. This is Johnny Mnemonic?
This is Johnny Mnemonic.
Yes.
Starring Keanu Reeves.
John Wick, I know. You were like, very capable. Yeah, very capable. Yes.
You know, that could be another unlikely shared universe.
I know.
Johnny Mnemonic Wick.
Yeah, Johnny Mnemonic Wick.
Mnemonic.
Yeah, Mnemonic. Hey! Oh, guys.
Yeah.
I think we just did it.
Dennis Akiyama.
That is correct.
Is the actor no longer with us. Rest in peace, Dennis Akiyama.
But he had like a pretty solid career. You know, Johnny Mnemonic is in,
1995?
Yeah, 1995. And yeah, he works pretty consistently, I think, up until his death.
Well, yeah. Shout out to you, Dennis Akiyama.
Well done.
Very nice.
All right. I guess I'll round things off here. When we meet Claire Nouveau, she seems to have something of a medical abnormality, a trifurcated cervix, as we've established already.
Not a real thing.
This is pure fiction here. Apparently prevents her from having children. The Mantle twins seem very convinced of this. And when she asks about the possibility of triplets, they're like, nope, not going to happen. But you know what? These gynecologist wonderkins and modern medicine don't know everything. And that is because, psych, Claire has had children. 3, actually. And 2 of them are fraternal twins.
Whoa.
You see, being a successful actress, Claire has kept her public and private life very separate. Nouveau, clearly a stage name. Her actual last name is Pascal. And it's quite good that there is some separation here, because 5 years before the events of the film that we're talking about today, she was at the center of a strange and terrible family tragedy. When hosting Thanksgiving back in 1983, she and her youngest son, Anthony, were reunited with her son, Marty, and his fiancée and college girlfriend, Leslie, in tow, as well as with Marty's twin sister, who goes by the name Jackie O. Jackie is obsessed with the Kennedy assassination, so much so that she dresses and assumes the role of the slain president's widow, and has even tried to play out a killing of her own. Her attempts at first-degree murder in the name of cosplay put her in a mental institution. But it's Thanksgiving, and she's out now. and she's triggered immensely by the presence of her twin brother's intentions to get married. You see, Marty and Jackie O have a very complicated past, one that creates a disruptive and complicated outcome there at Christmas dinner. Distraught by these events, Claire does everything she can to continue her work in the arts, successfully keeping it under wraps. Now a woman who is perhaps nearing the end of her childbearing years, she decides it's time to try again for another child. Hopefully, this one free of the drama and baggage of her twins, which brings her to the Mantle practice. The way I see it, if she can show up at the Mantle practice unaware that they're identical twin brothers, the Mantle twins can be very unaware of her past too. Hence, the negative diagnosis on kids. The desire for kids subsides rather quickly when Claire's libido takes over and she falls madly in love with what she thinks is just Elliot, Beverly, I don't know, one of the two. And when the twinness of this whole situation is revealed, Claire is understandably shocked, but all too aware of the codependencies that can develop between twins. Claire decides that she can try to right a cosmic wrong and stick around to help Beverly through this depression. But perhaps, like the past actions of her mentally unstable twin daughter before, Claire is about to get a lot more than she bargained for.
I don't have the answer, but that was entertaining.
That was great. I don't know this movie. I feel very confident in saying that.
No, it's okay. Yeah. So this is a movie called House of Yes.
Okay. So I have heard of this movie. Yeah. I've not seen it.
I think this movie's probably most famous for Parker Posey's lead performance in this. She plays the Jackie O character. She is magnetic as hell in this movie, but the matriarch in this film is played by Geneviève Bujold, who happens to play Claire in Dead Ringers, but no, she's Miss Pascal in House of Yes, which is a funky little movie, but I do recommend it. It's snappy. It's got like a vibe to it. Very easy to watch.
Very cool.
The mom's
Not to be confused with the
Club in Bushwick.
Yeah. This film was written and directed by, I think, Mark Waters, who would go on to do Mean Girls.
Yeah. So, this was so fun.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I agree. Very fun.
Yeah, I'm really glad we got to talk about Dead Ringers. Opinions vary, but I think we had a very lively discussion about it. And, in considering the fabric of this episode cycle that it's a part of, it's a unique entry for the, like, as you pointed out, Madeline, the amount of screen time that Jeremy Irons has as these two characters. Also, just the mutedness of some aspects of the movie in relation to some other things we're going to discuss. And, none of us are twins, but, maybe if there are twins out there who hear this, maybe there's a sense of realism that they see in the film. I don't know. I don't want to presume that. But
I think most of the twins that I know would want to stay far away from this kind of relationship.
Yeah. Yes. And, there's a line that Elliot says to Claire, I think, in that restaurant confrontation scene where he says, "You contribute a confusing element to the Mantle brothers saga, possibly a destructive one," which is a great line to outline his manipulative energy. But I think that this film has contributed a fascinating element to our episode cycle, affirmatively a brilliant one.
Like, not destructive.
Yes, or a constructive one.
That's I like
there
that better.
We go.
Yep. Affirmatively a constructive element.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always fun to talk about a movie where we differ slightly. That just adds to my enjoyment of the conversation. So, Emilio, I'm actually really glad that you came into this being like, I don't know if this really worked for me. I have a few qualms with this movie because I feel like I did not fall in that particular camp, but there were things watching this originally that I was like, I don't know if this totally works for me, but I think it's a pretty brilliant movie. I really enjoyed watching it. Again, I think Jeremy Irons is giving a perfect performance. I have no notes for his performance whatsoever.
It's pretty remarkable.
And we haven't talked about the fact that he does not win the Oscar for this. He wins the Oscar the following year, I think.
For reversal
two years
I think
later,
it's 2 years later. But
for Reversal of Fortune, where he plays Klaus von Bülow.
Yeah, and he thanks Cronenberg in his acceptance speech.
Yeah.
Partially because I think he knows, he's like, this was the movie that allowed the other movies to happen.
Totally.
Even though Dead Ringers does depict certain reversals of fortune.
That's true. Yes, yeah. Not to be confused.
Yes. Yeah. One of my favorite Family Guy cutaway moments is, I think Peter Griffin says something about, it's like if there were a Jeremy Irons cereal, and then you see if, someone doing the voice of Jeremy Irons going, "If you think you are going to find a prize at the bottom of the box, you are not." But
I mean, he's got like this voice, man. I'll listen to him recite the phone book, for goodness sake. He's amazing.
Yeah, I think that, maybe the rewards you get from watching this movie, they're not as flashy as a prize at the bottom of the box, but I do think the rewards are many. And I really do think this is, of the Cronenberg films I've seen, and I assume of the ones I have yet to see, one of his finest. After 3 viewings, I feel very steadfast in that conviction.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, if you're relatively new to the Cronenberg experience, I feel like there are other movies I personally would probably recommend over this one. But that's not to say it's not a well-directed film. I think technically it's a really brilliant film. The performances are great, particularly with Jeremy Irons. I've said it before, and I will kind of stand on this, which is that I think the mistake that this movie makes is ultimately wanting to really give these guys like a Greek tragedy arc.
Yep.
The way I thought about this for myself is, so the movie that comes right before, we've talked about this, is The Fly. I feel like this movie is going for The Fly in the end, from a perspective of where your heart is with these characters. I feel like if this movie took more of a Videodrome approach, which is a little less attachment to the characters, it's a little more detached, there's more distance, I think, from it. There's enough there for us to find that emotional connection. I feel like when the movie is really trying to ramp it up, the movie lost me a little bit, but still an interesting film, certainly worth watching. I would say definitely it's an important Cronenberg film.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think this
Very
is one where it's like
his filmography.
It doesn't work for me as well as other films of his, but I think it's like an important movie to see if you're like, what are like 5 or 6 Cronenberg films you should see? I think this is one you should see.
Yeah. Maybe The Fly is more the entry point, but this is one, to have somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
Well, cool. And so as we continue this episode cycle, focusing on twins and doppelgangers, I mean, we always, in any given cycle of ours, we have a 2-shot, but that's an especially appropriate type of episode for a episode cycle that is entirely concerned with doubles, with duality. And so, funny enough, both of the films that we're going to cover in this 2-shot have been mentioned briefly in this episode already. And one of them, it shares a particular visual similarity with Dead Ringers in the use of red robes. And this is a film so both of these films that we're going to talk about are survive the night thriller horror movies from within the last decade that concern people who have what may seem to be like some kind of happy refuge that is suddenly interrupted by some kind of mass onslaught concerning in some amount doppelgangers. Mm. The first of those 2 films, the one with the red robes, maybe you've already put the pieces together. It's by another filmmaker who we'll be covering for the first time. That is Jordan Peele. And the movie is Us. And the film we're pairing it with is a much more recent film. And in fact, one of the movies that sprouted the idea for this episode cycle in my head. And the only film, fun fact, where the actor playing a dual role has won an Oscar for their dual performance. Yes, get your guitars in tune, get your teeth sharp. We are talking Sinners.
Yay.
Yeah. And this will be a unanimous 2-shot. We have all seen both of these movies before. Well, in addition to this podcast, you can follow us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at Sleepless Cinematic Pod. You can subscribe to our monthly newsletter at sleeplesscinematicpod.substack.com. And of course, you can contact us via email. We would love to hear from you. Write to us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. If you're on Letterboxd, you can follow me, Madeline, at Patroness of Cats.
And you can follow me, Julian, at Julian_Barthold. If you're listening to us for the first time, thank you for finding us. Or if this is the 7th, 8th, or 90th or 95th time you've listened to us, thanks for sticking with us. We've really grown to love doing this, and it means the world to have our budding listenership grow.
And if you haven't already, we'd ask you, return listener, please write us a positive review, rate us on your podcast platform of choice. This is one of the best ways for new listeners to find us and help our podcast take its next steps.
This is what my dad wants for his birthday, is for you to review us on Apple Podcasts.
No way.
No, I'm speaking for him. I'm just saying, do it for my dad.
Oh, yeah. Do it for Richard. go listen to our episodes about Tom Waits and Richard Nixon.
And Richard Nixon in film.
And Richard Nixon in film.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I can tell you guys, I've been doing some digging around. This is actually something that is helping us right now. So please keep that train a-rolling. If you like what we do, write us a positive review on your podcast platform of choice. You can also keep it grassroots. Please tell a friend to tell a friend about the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast, because that helps too.
I want some ice cream.